Welcome back to BBQ Pit MMA. Another Tuesday night, another preview for the UFC coming up this weekend. Surprise for the UFC fans as they were, planning on selling tickets to this event, and then last second they closed it to the public, and it will be like a pandemic card at the Apex Arena. So UFC Vegas 61, Mackenzie, Dern, Janna. Dern, black belt in jiu-jitsu. Jan, 15-3-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. 0-1 via submission, with that submission loss being in her fourth professional fight back in 2010. So hasn't been submitted in about 12 years or more. Going up against Mackenzie Dern, who is predominantly a grappler, 22 gold medals in grappling from the years 2012 to 2016. She got the most submission wins in UFC strawweight history at 4. Mackenzie Dern is 7-2 in the UFC. Wins over Amanda Cooper, Hannah Cyphers, Nina Nunes, and Tisha Torres, which was April of this year. She's 12-2 as a pro, 7 wins via submission, both of her losses being decisions. That was against Amanda Ribas and Marina Rodriguez. Janna is 6-2 in the UFC currently on a 2-fight losing streak, with a TKO loss to Carla Esparza of May of last year, and then losing a split decision to Marina Rodriguez in March of this year. You've got UFC wins over Angela Hill, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and Claudia Gadelha. I think this really comes down to who's going to be better at their strength. So Janna is a good striker. She's a good point fighter, good at winning decisions. Mackenzie Dern is good at bringing you down, holding you down, beating you up, and submitting you. Obviously, Janna has not proved to be somebody who can't be submitted, because she was submitted earlier in her career. And going up against somebody like that has a black belt in jiu-jitsu like Mackenzie Dern, I think that's what's going to happen in this fight as well. I'm going to go Dern via submission. Randy Brown, I'm picking all these, by the way, these 4 fights that I have here. I'll tell this to Ian, too, if he watched the videos. Ian, I picked these 4 fights without seeing the odds. So these 4 fights are 100% zero bias towards the odds whatsoever. It's strictly who I think is going to win based off of matchups and shit like that. Credentials, yada, yada. Co-main event, Randy Brown, Francisco Trinaldo. Both men having brown belt in jiu-jitsu. Randy Brown is 15-4 with 6 wins via knockout, 5 wins via submission. He has been finished in 3 of his 4 losses, twice by knockout, once via submission against Michael Graves. 9-4 in the UFC, currently on a 3-fight winning streak that includes submissions over Alex Oliveira and then a decision over Jared Gooden and Chaos Williams. His 4 career losses are against Michael Graves, Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, and Vicente Luque, all 4 of those losses coming inside the UFC. He's coming into this fight with a 7-inch height and an 8-inch reach advantage over Francisco Trinaldo. I don't even got to read over Francisco Trinaldo's things. I mean, he's an older guy, 44 years old. He's got great cardio, good power in his hands. I think what it's going to come down to is Francisco Trinaldo relies heavily on his grappling when he is undersized. We've seen him fight. He's 28-8 as a pro, so we've seen him fight plenty of times in the UFC. He's 18-7 in the UFC, so 25 times in the UFC. And he's got power in his hands. He could strike with the best of them. But when he's outsized, when he's got somebody that's much bigger than him, he likes to take you down. He likes to make it dirty on the ground. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Randy Brown. I think Randy Brown has equal or better credentials grappling. And being longer is actually going to help him on the ground as well. I mean, normally it would help other fighters against Trinaldo. But this 7 inches of height, 8 inches of reach is insane when it comes to guys that are this weight. Randy Brown also has knockout power, very unique strikes off his back and standing when he's on top. I think it's pretty handily going to be Randy Brown in this one. So, Tabitha Ruchi versus Jessica Penne. I don't think this is on the main card. I don't think either of these last 2 fights I did were on the main card. I just thought seeing them interesting, and I felt like I wanted to preview these Just for reference, because I have Ian's picks in front of me. I know it's very rare that I have his picks on a Tuesday night, but I do have his picks in front of me. And we have the first two picks the same. He picked Mackenzie Dern. He picked Randy Brown. Let's see how it continues. Tabitha Ruchi is 7-1, with her only loss being a knockout TKO loss to Manon Fayot in June. He is 2-1 in the UFC. Or she is 2-1 in the UFC, winning her last two by decision over Maria Oliveira and Poliana Viana. 4 out of 7 of her wins via decision. She's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, black belt in judo. Coming into this fight, 27 years old, 4-inch height, and a 6-inch reach disadvantage against the veteran Jessica Penne, who is a black belt in jiu-jitsu and a brown belt in judo. So a little bit better in the clinch is Ruchi, but they should be the same on the ground. Jessica Penne is 14-6 as a pro, 3-4 in the UFC. She won her UFC debut against Rodna Marcos, then lost 3 straight to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Andrade, and Danielle Taylor. Came back from that, won back-to-back fights against Lupe Godinez and Karolina Kovacevic before losing her last fight to Emily Ducoute in July of this year. She got 8 wins via submission, 4 wins via decision. Only been submitted once, and that was was TKO'd twice by Andrade and Joanna. So, I mean, I think this fight can go anywhere. I didn't think that Tabitha Ruchi was going to come into this fight with that much of a size advantage. I think that's probably the part that kind of surprised me the most out of all this. But still, I kind of got to stick with Ruchi, because although Penne is 2-1 in her last 3, she beat Lupe Godinez, she beat Karolina Kovacevic, so it's 2 really good wins. I think she's still on the older side of MMA. I'm not calling her old. I know how women get with the old and the weight thing. But I'm not saying she's old. I'm just saying that MMA fighters and just fighters in general have a span of time in which they fight, in which their prime is, in which they are high level, and then they have a span in which they start their decline. And I think even though she is 2-1 in her last 3, I think Penne has been on her decline for quite some time now. And I think it's Tabitha Ruchi's time to step in and be an up-and-comer in the UFC. So I'm going to go Ruchi right there. Mike Davis versus Vyacheslav Borisov. Hopefully not murdering that name. Borisov is 6-2 as a pro, 1-1 in the UFC with a TKO win over Dakota Bush in his debut, and then a unanimous decision loss to Mark DeCasey in March of this year. He's wins prior to the UFC against Chris Duncan on the Contender Series and Ali Zabian in his second professional fight. He's 5 out of 6 of his wins via TKO or knockout. He's never been finished in his professional career. He's got power punches, great takedown defense. He's all around. He's kind of like a bowling ball, this guy. He's really, really compact, and if he lands, he's going to hurt you. Mike Davis, though, 9-2, 7 wins via knockout, never been knocked out in his pro career. Has only been submitted once. That was by Gilbert Burns in his UFC debut, which, if you got to fight Gilbert Burns in UFC debut, that kind of sucks. You know what I mean? So he's 2-1 in the UFC, should be 3-0. He shouldn't have been fighting Burns in his debut. He took it on short notice. I hear you. After that, he knocked out Thomas Gifford, which was from a guy who's making what I call his UFC debut. Because, like I said, when a guy comes in and at this point he's 7-1, 8 professional fights, Gilbert Burns is not the move, man. I wouldn't consider that his debut. I consider that a way for him to get into the UFC in a fight that he probably didn't think that he had a chance in. And then now he's 2-0. This is not a gruesome knockout over Thomas Gifford. And then a unanimous decision win over Mason Jones, which that fight was way more impressive to me. He looked like a world-class boxer against Mason Jones. He looked like he had been, fighting Floyd Mayweather for years. This guy just looked crisp, power at the end of his strikes, jab looked amazing. The guy's got good boxing. He was 3-0 as a professional boxer with 2 of those wins via knockout. He shows the skill of boxing as a guy who's fought 10, 15 times. Not a guy that's only fought 3 times professionally. He shows the skills of guys who are veterans of the sport of boxing. And that's where I think the turning point is going to be. He does have a 2-inch height and a 3.5-inch reach advantage over Borislav, which I think also is going to help his striking a little bit. But I think the fact that he is as far advanced boxing as he is compared to guys that, he's fighting Borislav. Borislav 6-2 is professional. 8 fights professionally to Davis's 11 fights professionally, but he just seems way farther advanced striking wise than he actually, what his record shows. He was also 5-0 with his time in the Island Fights promotion, winning all 5 of those fights via finish. I think 4 knockouts and a submission, or 3 knockouts and 2 submissions, something like that. The guy's got skills, man. The guy is a finisher. I've seen him live fight Guerrera. What was Guerrera's? Carlos Guerrera, I think might have been his name. The debut or in the main event that night. He was one of the. I went there with 3 guys that I was really, really scouting, and that was Damon Miner, who he kind of fell off. He was one of the. He was like 3-0 at the time. 3 savage knockouts. He was like the number 1 lightweight out of Virginia. He was like 20-something in the United States or something like that. He kind of fell off after that. But I was watching him, Impa Kasaganai, who made it to the UFC. And then Mike Davis was the 3rd guy, and he also has made it to the UFC and is actually having pretty successful of a career. So those 3 guys that I knew to keep an eye out for that day, not to toot my own horn, 2 of them in the UFC. The 3rd one, let's take a look at Damon Miner. Let's just see how he's doing nowadays, because he won that fight. I think he was fighting Wesley Golden or something like that. 5-2, so he didn't fall off too bad. But he was 3-0. Oh no, he wasn't actually. He was 4-1 when I seen him. He lost a split decision to Robert Hale. But yeah, two referee stoppages and a decision in his 3 fights prior to the loss. Then in the fight prior to me seeing him, he wanted a decision win over an up-and-coming guy, 2-1. Then I watched the referee stop it against Wesley Golden. Then he gets knocked out in a gruesome flying knee knockout by Jarvis Ross, or Javanis Ross. And that was in May of 2019, so 3 years ago, over 3 years ago, since this guy has fought. Maybe he went to another sport. I'm not entirely sure. I guess I'll have to reach out and see what's going on with him. Maybe he's dealing with some injuries or something, but 5-2 is not bad. 5-2 is the type of guy you string together another couple of wins. He's on the Contender Series soon, and I went 3 for 3. So we'll definitely have to check in with him and see what's going on, and see if he retired or what's happening, because he's got skills. He's for that division. He's a shorter guy. He comes into those fights way muscular than 90% of lightweights that are around there. Dude's jacked, man. Dude's got mad skills. So I'm going to reach out to him and see what's going on with him. Other fights on this card: Hani Barsoles versus Trevin Jones. Sadiq Youssef will be going up against Don Shanis. John Castana up against Daniel Santos in a catchweight bout. Alexio Olenek will be going up against Ir Latifi. That should be a good jiu-jitsu versus wrestling fight. Joaquim Silva up against Jesse Ronson. Christoph Jotko will be fighting Brendan Allen. Maxim Gresham will be fighting Felipe Lins. Leah Letson against Chelsea Chandler. And then finally, Claudio Canetti versus Randy Costa will be kicking off the card. Maybe. They didn't have, when I looked at this earlier this week, they didn't even remotely have anything close to being a set bout order or anything like that. I think they were kind of content with Dern versus Jan for the main event and Brown versus Trinaldo for the co-main. But when I was looking at it, because I looked at it, I think, over the weekend, there was no set order yet. It was just all randomly thrown together. I kind of had to go from the UFC website to Wikipedia to Tapology to kind of make sure I was verifying that all of the fights that I was seeing were actually on the card. So They are. Apparently one was close, but it turned into a catch fight. It's a catch weight fight. But yeah, man, this Saturday night, UFC Vegas 61, Las Vegas, Apex, no fans, just like in COVID. See you there, and if you're not there, come back here next Tuesday. We'll be doing another UFC preview. Until then, stay barbecued. You guys know what the fuck it is, right? There.